Woo! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Mohawk Motors. My name is Jason. We are still working hard on these 1986 Squarebody K10, getting this thing LS and 4L80 swapped. This is the next part in the series, part 2. I'm going to show you a little bit that I got done since the last video to now. It's boring stuff. You didn't miss anything exciting. And then give you an idea of what I'm going to try to get accomplished in this video. Alright, so since the last video, I've been doing all the boring preparation stuff that you don't need to see me do. It's not exciting, it doesn't make good video content, and you may or may not want to do this, and you definitely don't need me to tell you how to do these things. So for one, I cleaned up the engine compartment. I got the old fuel feed and return lines taken out, the old vent line and charcoal canister removed. We're not going to be using any of that stuff with the LS. What else? I got the rest of the electrical out of the engine compartment that we're not using. The other various hoses and rubber lines that the previous owners had poked through the firewall, removed and out of our way. And I also replaced the old worn out rubber engine mount bushings with new urethane engine mount bushings. So those will give the engine plenty of support. It should provide, you know, enough vibration dampening to be comfortable, but still enough rigidity to get the power to the wheels where it belongs, not lost in movement of the engine. I sprayed a little black paint on the frame, get that all cleaned up. I think I told you this in the last video, but I pressure washed the whole engine compartment as well before I painted, just to get it, you know, it looks better now. It's cleaner, it's tidier, it looks like someone who actually cared a little bit did the job. So the truck itself is ready for me to get the engine stuck into it. Let me show you the engine. So the engine, same thing. It's been mostly just reassembly of what I took off of it. Nothing exciting. You know, as I said before, we did all new gaskets. So new valve cover gaskets, new front cover gaskets, new front main seal, new oil pan gasket, and new oil pump pickup tube O-ring. Those things are all tucked up, ready to go. We're reusing the alternator and power steering pump that were originally on this engine. They will work with the truck. We don't need to mess with them. We don't need to do anything with them. I just pressure washed them off and got them cleaned up. The water pump, also good. Didn't have any problems. We're not replacing it. I'm not a proponent of, while you're in there, replace this stuff. This water pump worked perfectly. There's no reason to replace a perfectly good water pump. It's not broken. So we're reusing that water pump. It looks like it already has a newer tensioner on it, so we're reusing that tensioner as well. Got the ignition coils all put back on. I did pull all the spark plugs to check those. Gaps all look good. Plugs look relatively new. I don't think they've been in very long. So those are going back in it. I have the plug wires set aside as well. We're going to reuse the plug wires that were on the engine. Again, none of this stuff was broken. The engine ran great. You don't need to replace all those things. And then I got started on getting this thing prepped to actually go in the truck. So one of the things that I needed to do is the truck, the original gauges in the truck, uses an electronic oil pressure sensor. And this is the original oil pressure sensor right here. It came off of the 350 that was in the truck. Now what I've done to use it, this uses a 3/8 27 NPT thread. So all I did was my little oil bypass here. Now this bypasses an oil cooler if you're not using it. The little hole in the end, I drilled that through into the actual oil passage, and then I tapped it for a 3/8 27 NPT thread. Put a little liquid thread sealant, liquid Teflon on the threads, tightened her in. She should be good to go. She'll give us an accurate, good oil pressure reading right on the factory gauge. All I'll have to do is hook up the original sending unit wire. I also got my motor mount adapters and the original motor mounts bolted onto the engine. And I'll show you We did both sides here. The passenger side is a little bit brighter. So these are ICT billet motor mount adapter plates. I believe these work for multiple applications, converting from a traditional small block Chevy, like a 350, 327, even a small block 400, to an LS. So the plate bolts to the engine using the supplied countersunk bolts, and then you bolt your motor mounts, the original clamshell mounts, onto the adapter plate. I've used these adapter plates in my Squarebody. I use these in my other friend Matt's OBS Suburban that we swapped. I really like these brackets because they give you some flexibility in where you mount the engine. And now in this case, the brackets should be mounted in the forwardmost hole to replicate a stock positioning of the engine, meaning the bell housing mounting surface will be in the same position it was the 350 or the small block engine had it. So if you were converting from 350 to LS, you would be able to just put this right back where it was. It would match right back up with your transmission. You're gonna have no problems. Now, what we're doing on this one is not only going to LS, we're also converting to a 4L80E transmission. And the 4L80E, I can't remember the exact measurement, but it's about 2 inches longer than the 700R4 transmission that this truck had in it. Now, to make up for that difference in length, hopefully without having to modify our drive shafts, we're going to be mounting the engine forward of an original position. So rather than mounting in the factory replication position, we've moved the clamshell bracket back. And we've moved it as far back as these adapter plates allow, which is 2 1/4 inches. So when we factor that together, moving the engine 2 1/4 inches forward, that should make up for our roughly 2-inch longer transmission. And hopefully, if I've done all my math and reading correctly, we'll be able to mount the transfer case and the transmission crossmember right back where they were when I took this truck apart. So we won't need to modify the drive shafts. We won't need to change the lengths, none of that stuff, the transfer case shifter linkage. It'll all line right back up just like it did before, except now we're gonna have a 4L80 transmission and an LS instead of that 350 and 700R4. This is the first time I've done it all in one go, so we're gonna see if my math all worked out the way it should have. It should. And hopefully I'm not taking this thing apart to move motor mount brackets or anything else. I think worst case with this setup, I may need to re-drill the holes for the transmission cross member in the frame like a 1/4 inch further back. But we'll figure that out when we get there. It's going to be a little bit until we can get the transmission actually bolted into the truck. But my goal for today is to get the engine sitting in the truck. I want to get the clamshells sitting back down on the mounts. I want to get the intake manifold back onto the engine. And depending on if I have enough time, I would really like to try to get the driver's side header installed. That one may or may not give us some issues with the factory transmission shifter linkage. The company we bought them from says it will clear. The internet says it will not. So we're going to figure that out. Maybe we'll have to do some exhaust work, maybe not. But I think that brings you up on what I've done while you weren't here watching. And next step is get this engine rolled out of the garage, get it lifted up on the hoist. While I have it lifted up on the hoist, I'm going to pull the flex plate. This engine originally had a 4L65 behind it, so this flex plate will not work with the 4L80. We're going to remove this flex plate, replace the rear cover seal and the rear main seal, put that back together, and then I have a 4L80 flex plate with the little spacer to get the distance right. So while it's up on the hoist, I'll do that, and then we're going to try to get it slung into the truck and see if this is going to sit right back down onto those motor mounts like I would like it to, or if it's going to more than likely fight me a little bit and I'm going to have to adjust some stuff. So yeah, let's get out there in the hot and get this thing done. All right, everybody, move along. Pretty easy stuff here, just remove and replace. So I took the 4L60 flex plate off. I got the 4L80 spacer and flex plate on. I replaced the rear cover gasket and rear main seal while I had that stuff apart. And those things, it's just a bunch of 10mm bolts, guys. You take the 10mm bolts off, you take it off, you take the old seal out, you push the new one in, you put it back together, you line it up, you torque the bolts. Easy peasy. So all sealed up back here. I went ahead and I put the starter back on to make sure it lines up the way it's supposed to with this flex plate. It does. Everything's going to be good to go there. So next step, really, hopefully, like, this is the part that I really hope it just cooperates with me, is lift it up, roll it in, sit it down on the motor mounts. It's very easy to say. It almost never goes that easily, but we're gonna give it a shot. Alright, well, pleasantly surprised today, everybody. Things that honestly went smoother than I expected it to. So I got it in, I got it sitting down on the mounts, bolted to the motor mounts, and everything clears. Now it'll be a different story about the headers. They're supposed to fit. They're marketed, described, and advertised as a direct fit for an LS 4.8, 5.3, or 6.0 in an 80 to 87 square body truck, K30, or sorry, excuse me, K10. So we'll see about that when we get to that point. But for now, I'm just pumped that the motor mounts lined up, everything fit. I didn't have to do any major persuasion, just some jiggling and tapping to get the motor mount bolts through the holes. And yeah, I like where it's sitting. I am going to get the intake set down on it today, just because, you know, obviously the truck is outside and I don't want the intake ports to be open for something to fall in or some little critter to climb down into. So I am going to get the intake manifold bolted back onto it just to make sure that's all sealed up. And I'll probably stuff some rags in the exhaust ports just to, you know, try to keep that cleared out of anything as well. But I'm optimistic. I think we got all the right parts. I think it's all going to fit. I think it's all going to clear. I don't think we're going to have any major issues to figure out. I will note it's very tight. back there by the rear coil pack on the driver's side, between the coil packs and the brake booster. So once I get the transmission mounted to it and get it lifted into position and bolted up, hopefully that will still clear, but we'll see. I think it's going to be okay, but we'll have to see once we get there. I can't remember if I don't think I mentioned this before. If we can get away with moving this engine as far forward as we are, because we're going to an electric fan setup. If we are going to be sticking with the mechanical fans, or the mechanical fan that's driven off the water pump pulley, I'm not sure if that would still clear the radiator or not. But in our case, we're going to be using the electric fans from like a 2005 to 2007 classic 1500 pickup or SUV, and they're pretty low profile. They're going to mount up, fit, we won't have any issues there. So I'm pumped, optimistic. This is going well. Now let's get the intake manifold back on this thing, and then I think I'm going to try to get out of the heat. It is hot today. Voila! Intake manifold is back on, torqued in place. Got the little steam port line hooked up, the crankcase vent hooked up, and the rear breather hooked up. So it's sealed up enough that I don't think anything's going to climb in there, crawl in there, or anything until I can get back out and work on it tomorrow. I'm calling it for the day. I'm sweaty, I'm hot, I'm ready to get out of the heat. So pick back up tomorrow. Well, team, I had planned on taking the next day and getting the radiator and some of the other components fitted into the engine compartment around the engine, but instead this little guy decided to join us in the world. So he is happy and healthy. Mom is happy and healthy. She was a superstar through the whole birth process, and we're doing well. So taking care of him and Mom and the other two kids, and we'll pick back up on this as soon as possible. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and until the next video, everybody, take care.